This is Suffolk, a county of Eastern England. The landscape of Eastern England, or East Anglia as it is more commonly known, has remained largely unchanged for hundreds of years. The land here is flat, the skies are vast. During the time of Boudicca, these lands were largely vacant marshes and swamps, and to this day that still remains the case, or at least to some extent. However, there was and still are small settlements here, towns, villages, a quiet place to live and call home. One such village is where our story begins. Blythburgh. It was the 4th of August in the year 1577. A storm like no other was ravaging the region. Property was getting destroyed, lives were at risk, the villagers were scared. This storm was unlike anything they had ever experienced. It seemed only one structure could withstand the wrath of the wind and rain. The church. And so the villagers, in their desperation, sought refuge in the Holy Trinity Church, the cathedral of the marshes. Inside the church, the villagers waited and prayed for salvation. The storm was described as bringing darkness, rain, hail, thunder, and lightning as was never seen alike. It was almost as if the end of the world was approaching. The storm outside reaped destruction and fear. And that was when the doors burst open, allowing the rain and wind to desecrate this holy space. But it was not the storm that blew these doors open, for at the open door emerged a creature. A great black dog of enormous stature and fiery red eyes stood before the open congregation. The mere sight of this hellish entity induced panic amongst the huddled villagers. That panic would turn to terror when the dog charged down the aisle and began to savage people. In the chaos, the creature was reported as having demonic capabilities, as many who were savaged by the dog were left with scorch marks in their flesh. At least 2 people were reported to have been killed that day. Once the dog had finished its attack, it left the church through the main doors and vanished into the storm, but not before leaving burn marks on the door. Burn marks that can still be seen to this day. The locals called them the Devil's Fingerprints. However, this was not the full story of what had happened that day in 1577, for another church, in another town, had been paid a similar visit earlier that day. In the market town of Bungay, not far from Blythburgh, the residents too were sheltering from the storm in their local church of St. Mary's, when, to a clap of thunder, the same creature burst into the church and killed an undisclosed number of people. In a frenzy of chaos, the creature escaped and vanished into legend. The 17th century pamphleter Abraham Fleming documented the accounts of the creature and described it as such. This black dog, or the devil in such a likeness, God he knoweth all who worketh all, running all along down the body of the church, with great swiftness and incredible haste, among the people in a visible form and shape, passed between 2 persons as they were kneeling upon their knees, and occupied in prayer as it seemed, wrung the necks of them both, at one instant clean backward, insomuch that even at a moment where they kneeled, they strangely died. All down the church in the midst of fire, the hellish monster flew, and passing onward to the choir, he many people slew. Amongst the native English, this creature goes by many names: Hellhound, Old Shuck, Devil Dog, though to this day, there is one name that evokes this creature more than any other: the Black Shuck. So, just what is this Black Shuck? And why is this entity so prevalent within English folklore? Uncovering the origins of this strange creature is not an easy task. Much of ancient English history is faded and distant, obscured by war, bloodshed, and succession. And yet, amongst all of that turbulence, behind the storm, the Black Shuck remains an ever-present shadow. What we do know with some degree of certainty is the origin of the word shuck. It is more than likely that shuck is derived from the Old English word shakka, meaning devil. The story of Blytheburg and Bungay has certainly left its mark. However, it is not hard to rationalise the events of 1577. We know there was a storm, and we know that both churches were damaged by said storm. Some accounts even state that the entire church spire crashed through the roof of both churches during the storm. Deaths were recorded. Amongst the carnage inflicted by the demonic hound, it was officially stated that at least 2 bell ringers were struck by lightning and killed within the tower of Blytheburg. Perhaps then the fires and scorch marks have a more natural and innocent source. Perhaps there really was a dog, an earthly one, that had merely been driven mad by the storm outside and lashed out in a frenzy. Despite these rationalizations, that shadow remains ever present today. The story of Blytheburg and Bungay is certainly the most well-known documentation of a hellish black dog, and yet, all across England, you can find many such encounters. This creature is known locally as the Barghest. The Barghest is said to roam the Snickelways and side roads of York, preying on passers-by, and has also been seen near Clifford's Tower. To see this monstrous dog is said to be a warning of impending doom. The Black Dog of Aylesbury. A man who lived in a village near Aylesbury in Buckinghamshire would go each morning and night to milk his cows in a distant field. One night, on his way there, he encountered a sinister black dog, and every night thereafter until he brought a friend along with him. When the dog appeared again, he attacked it using the yoke of his milk pails as a weapon, but when he did so the dog vanished and the man fell senseless to the ground. He was carried home alive but remained speechless and paralytic for the rest of his life. The Black Dog of Newgate. The Black Dog of Newgate has been said to haunt the Newgate prison for over 400 years, appearing before executions. According to legend, in 1596, a scholar was sent to the prison for witchcraft, but was killed and eaten by the starving prisoners before he was given a trial. The dog was said to appear soon after, and although the terrified men killed their guards and escaped, the beast is said to have hunted them down and killed them wherever they fled. The Black Dog of Preston. The Black Dog of Preston is said to be a guardian of the city gates, appearing when danger threatens the town. It is described as a headless dog who could howl nevertheless, and whose howl meant death, as also did its lying down upon a doorstep to someone who dwelt within that special place. The Black Dog of Tring. In the parish of Tring, Hertfordshire, a chimney sweep named Thomas Colley was executed by hanging in 1751 for the drowning murder of Ruth Osborne, whom he accused of being a witch. Colley's spirit now haunts the site of the gibbet, in the form of a black dog, and the clanking of his chains can also be heard. In one tale, a pair of men who encountered the dog saw a burst of flame before it appeared in front of them. Big as a Newfoundland with the usual burning eyes and long sharp teeth, after a few minutes it disappeared, either vanishing like a shadow or sinking into the earth. Guardian Black Dogs. Guardian black dogs refer to those relatively rare black dogs that are neither omens of death nor causes of it. Instead, they guide lost travelers and protect them from danger. Stories of this type became more widespread starting around the early 1900s. In different versions of one popular tale, a man was journeying along a lonely forest road at night when a large black dog appeared at his side and remained there until the man left the forest. On his return journey through the wood, the dog reappeared and did the same as before. Years later, 2 convicted prisoners told their chaplain that they would have robbed and murdered the wayfarer in the forest that night, but were intimidated by the presence of the black dog. The Guy Trash. The Guy Trash is a black dog and death omen of northern England that haunts solitary ways and also takes the form of a horse, mule, and cow. It was popularised in folklore by its mention in the novel Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. The Shrieker. The Shrieker of Lancashire and Yorkshire is a death omen like many others of its type, but it also wanders invisibly in the woods at night, uttering loud, piercing shrieks. It may also take visible form as a large black dog with enormous paws that make splashing sounds when walking, like old shoes walking in soft mud. For this reason, the Shrieker is also known as trash, another word for trudge or slog. The list goes on and on. I've barely scratched the surface in describing the depth of black dog folklore in England. And that is to say nothing of black dog legends in bordering countries of Scotland, Wales, and Cornwall. However, by sheer numbers of stories alone, it is clear that England and English folklore is the home of this creature, or creatures. Perhaps then it is worth looking at the origins of England itself to uncover this shadow. The Anglo-Saxons arrived on these shores somewhere around the year 410 AD, following the evacuation of Roman occupational forces. The Anglo-Saxons were made up of different tribes coming from Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands. It would therefore make sense to see black dog legends in one or all of these countries. It would make sense to see modern Germany harbouring black dog stories on par with modern England. However, that is not what we see. One can look through the cultures of Central Europe and Scandinavia and find very little cultural significance of black dogs. Rather than importing the black shuck, it's almost as if the Anglo-Saxons uncovered it. Some have suggested that black shuck's origin lies in the subsequent Viking invasions of Britain. Perhaps they brought the legend on the back of their folklore. Some have cited that Odin and Thor had a dog called Shuckir, and surely this was the origin of black shuck. Except, it wasn't. It turns out this is something of a misconception. There is nothing in Nordic or Viking folklore that acknowledges the existence of Shuckir. Odin is said to have had 2 hounds called Jerry and Freki. However, these were described as wolves, and do not match the distinct image of black shuck. Prior to Christendom, the Anglo-Saxons brought with them their own traditions, their own culture, and their own gods. Within that culture lies a story, one known as the Wild Hunt. The Wild Hunt is a folklore motif that can be found in Germanic, Nordic, and Anglo-Saxon paganism. The hunt is described as a frightening supernatural event, in which pagan mythological figures are witnessed riding on horseback in pursuit of some elusive prey. These mythological figures are often accompanied by a legion of ghostly undead soldiers, as well as their hunting dogs. Seeing the Wild Hunt was thought to forebode some catastrophe such as war or plague, or at best the death of the one who witnessed it. People encountering the hunt might also be abducted and taken into the underworld. Of course, this is just a story, a folkloric motif displaying the frightening power of the then pagan gods. That was until such a hunt was allegedly witnessed in, of all places, Eastern England. But what does the Wild Hunt and its apparent manifestation in Eastern England have to do with the black shuck? Well, as it turns out, the witness testimonies of that Wild Hunt just happen to include the very first descriptions of black shuck. It happened in Peterborough. The year was 1127. In the Peterborough Chronicle, there is an account of the Wild Hunt's appearance at night, beginning with the appointment of a disastrous abbot for the monastery. Many men both saw and heard a great number of huntsmen hunting. The huntsmen were black, huge and hideous, and rode on black horses and on black he-goats. And their hounds were jet black, with eyes like saucers and horrible. This was seen in the very deer park of the town of Peterborough, and in all the woods that stretch from the same town to Stamford, and in the night the monks heard them sounding and winding their horns. Reliable witnesses were said to have given the number of huntsmen as 20 or 30, and it is said in effect that this went on for 9 weeks, ending at Easter. Let no one be surprised at what we are about to relate, for it was common gossip up and down the countryside that after February 6th, many people both saw and heard a whole pack of huntsmen in full cry. They straddled black horses and black bucks, while their hounds were pitch black with staring, hideous eyes. This was seen in the very deer park of Peterborough town, and in all the woods stretching from that same spot as far as Stamford. All through the night, the monks heard them sounding and winding their horns. Reliable witnesses who kept watch in the night declared that they might well have been 20 or even 30 of them in this wild tantivy, as near as they could tell. It is from this alleged event in 1127 that the hellhound enters English folkloric culture. In certain parts of Britain, the hunt is said to be entirely composed of demonic dogs, chasing sinners or the unbaptized. It would seem that the black shuck is a permanent fixture of the English landscape. The cultural memory of this creature remains vivid still. Even to this day, people still report encountering a monstrous black dog, only for it to vanish in a flash of lightning and clap of thunder. As recently as 2014, a news article emerged detailing the excavation of an abnormally large dog skeleton near the site of church ruins in Suffolk. The bones of this creature were reportedly carbon dated to the time period in which the attacks on Blythburgh and Bungay took place. Of course, looking at this rationally, this is likely nothing more than the bones of a hunting dog, perhaps the dog of a nobleman. However, the people and their folklore will not be parted, it seems. This image, and the attention surrounding it, really does highlight to me how black dog folklore is physically ingrained in the English soil. That being said, however, black dog legends do exist outside of England. Curiously enough, they can be found as far afield as Canada, America, and Australia. It would seem that wherever the Anglo has tread, the black dog has followed him. This video is not intended to argue for the existence of the paranormal, nor is it intended to disavow those who subscribe to that way of thinking. I only wish to document the folklore of this land. Folklore is more important to me than any argument about the supernatural. Folklore is the lifeblood and identity of culture, and it is worth defending and protecting. The Wild Hunt was a product of early Anglo-Saxon culture. It would appear that these ghostly dogs have been scattered across England after being culturally severed from their Anglo-pagan origin. They now wander this land as spectres of a time long past. The Shrieker of Lancashire, the Barguest of York, the Gytrash of Northern England, and of course, the Black Shuck of East Anglia. They are shadows of our past, reminders of the culture, the people we once were.